Toda Tali, thank you very much. So I'm so happy to be again at the IC Summit, this time in DC. Nice seeing many friends over and new friends. I would like to introduce our panelists, Victoria Coates, Vice President of the Davis Institute for National Security and Foreign Policy at the Heritage Foundation, Elliott Abrams, Senior Fellow for Middle Eastern Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations, Dr. Anat Berko, a world-renowned expert on terrorism and policymaker, and Professor Boaz Ganor, President of Reichman University and the founder of the International Institute for Counterterrorism, the ICT at the Reichman University. I would like to open with an open question for the four of you, and feel free to answer. If I'd ask you now, a year into the current Israeli war, or wars that we're seeing in the Middle East, what does Iran is trying to achieve from your point of view, and each one of you using its expertise? Obviously, Anat, you deal with the proxies, Boaz, you deal with terrorism, and you two can bring us the American aspect, which is enormously important. So feel free to, from that, we'll try to gather down to business. So Anat, please.
Thank you, Yoav. Boker Tov. Good morning. Shabbat Shalom. I'm very happy to be here today with such a distinguished panel with great experts. I would like to start with a quotation. I spent 20 years face-to-face with terrorists in jail, interviewing them, researching them, and have a lot of insights. And I want to come back to an interview with the deputy of the Prime Minister of Hamas at that time in 2007, and what he said, it really started the relationship between Hamas and Islamic Jihad and the Iranian. Actually, it started in the 90s when a group of Hamas terrorists deported to Lebanon, and the Hezbollah Shia organization helped them, and they adopted many methods of terrorism and other tools to fight with Israel. What this sheikh told me at that time, it would be better for me that my son will marry a Christian woman and a Jewish one than a Shia, because the Shia know the truth and have strayed from it. So we are coming back, when we are speaking about Iran, to the conflict, the sushi conflict, as I like to call it, between the Sunni and the Shia. And I know that we are going to the 7th century, and people think, oh, it doesn't matter. Iran ready to fight with America, Israel, the West as a whole, till the last Arab. So they use the Arabs, but they actually much more smarter than them, and they say, okay, we have common denominator to fight against this enemy, the Zionist enemy. But there were different times with Iran. You know, I'm from Iraqi origin. My parents were born in Baghdad. My father fled from Baghdad to Iran. He spent 2 years in Iran. He got a shelter there. There was a big underground that helped Jews to fled from Iraq directly through Iran, Tehran, and after that to Israel. So what I want to say, that here we have a state that now involved in Ukraine, in this war with America and with Israel and with the West, and collaborate with Russia. And we need to go to the history, and we need to know that there were many wars between Russia and Iran. And also, in the history, Russia conquered part of Iran, the northern side of Iran. So this conflict is there. And now the Iranian try to find a way to say that Hamas actually is one of the section in Sunnah that actually are Shia, to be able to bridge this gap. So it's there, and it will come out soon, I'm sure.
Victoria, please.
Well, thank you for sushi. I'm going to borrow that.
Yeah.
That's a pretty great line. I think from a U.S. perspective, we have to be very clear that this is not just an Iranian attack on Israel, it's an Iranian attack on the United States as well. And a little noticed event in July of this year when the Director of National Intelligence put out a formal statement saying that Iran was supporting the pro-Hamas riots on campuses and in American cities. So they are actively bringing this here. And I think the plan that they have worked out over the last 3.5, almost 4 years now, has been to take the increased revenue they're getting now selling to China alone 1.75 million barrels a day, that all of that money, as it did under the sanctions relief from the JCPOA, is being poured into regional terrorism. And, we see the results. We have the anniversary of October 7th coming up in a couple of weeks. Last week, we had the anniversary of the Abraham Accords, which were only possible because of the Trump-era policy on Iran, which I was honored to collaborate with Elliott to some extent on, and it proved highly effective. And so that is, the kind of contrast that we see. But I think, for Iran's purposes, the enrichment they've had, both in terms of their nuclear program and in terms of their revenues, over the last 3.5 years, has revealed their true stripes. And, you couldn't try to reason with them. The Obama administration, many of the same people back now in the Biden-Harris administration tried to reason with them. Twice it has utterly failed. And we have now this kind of encirclement of Israel as well as problems here at home. So that's what we're seeing.
Thank you. I'm also stealing sushi. We're all stealing it.
But different toppings, please.
Yes. You asked the question, what is Iran trying for here? And I think we should not underestimate their ambition. What is the goal? To dominate the Gulf and the entire Middle East, to destroy the state of Israel, to kick the United States out of the region, and conquer Mecca and Medina, because they think Mecca and Medina should be in the hands of Shia, not Sunni, not the Al Saud. And if you had said that 25 years ago, 40 years ago, it would have looked pretty crazy. It looks less crazy today. They've had a very good period of 10 or 25 years. I think if you ask which country has had the most successful foreign policy in the world in the last 10 or 15 years, I could make a pretty good argument for Iran. Look at their influence in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Yemen, in Gaza. Now what are they trying? They're trying to increase instability in Jordan and in the West Bank. We see that there's money and there are guns pouring in. So they have a goal, and it is operationalized. They are actually doing it. To me, the most remarkable thing this year is the attack on Israel. It is the direct move against Israel, because previously...
April 14.
Yes, April 13th, 14th, depending on what time zone you're in. They had not done that previously. People said, they'll never do that. It's only proxies. And first. Second, the direct attack on the United States. Oh, okay, it's not direct. It's the Houthis. Houthi ballistic missiles. There's no such thing as a Houthi ballistic missile. Where do you think those missiles come from? And they attack American ships. In a classified memo that was referred to in the Wall Street Journal, the head of CENTCOM, Eric Kurilla, said to Washington, American sailors are going to die when they hit an American ship. we should be acting now because it's obvious, I think, what Iran is doing. They're attacking not just Israel, but us. But, you know, what we have said to CENTCOM and the US Navy, what the administration has said is, go out there. I hope some of you who are Israeli know a little bit maybe about baseball, but go out there and catch fly balls, but you don't get to be at bat. And now it's time, it's past time, for us to let the US Navy bat and hit some home runs.
The answer is simple. You don't need to be an expert for that. You just need to listen to what Khomeini said in 1979 when he conquered and revolt in Iran. The goal was set back then. And Khomeini said, this is not just an Islamic republic or Islamic revolution in Iran. The goal is to export the Islamic revolution to other parts of the world, actually to all the world. First of all, Mecca and Medina and the Middle East. Israel is an obstacle, big obstacle there. But then the rest of the world, that's the goal. Now, when I'm discussing this matter with many of my friends and colleagues in Israel, you might be surprised that I find some disagreement with most of them. When I argue that Israel is at war with Iran and not with Hamas, then the answer is yes. But when I start to explain that, I see a big difference. The question is, why are we at war with Iran? Why did Iran invoke this war against us? And where is the difference? I would like to argue that Iran initiated the war, planned the war, prepared the war, funded the war, and actually chose who would execute the war, which is the weak arm that they have, the Palestinian arm, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. I would go further than that, and I would speculate, I don't have intelligence on that, although my friends would argue with me, that they even decided what approximately would be the date of the 7th of October. But you have asked the question, why? Why did they do that? What are they trying to achieve? 3 goals. The least important goal is revenge. They hate us. We poke in their eyes for so many years. I don't want to mention scientists that died, fires that erupted in Tehran, cyber attacks, and so on and so forth. They have a booklet, an open booklet, and they write down. And unlike Israel, they are not in a rush. And they like to give the revenge cold. It's tastier for them. That's revenge. But that's the least important reason. The second reason, much more important, they decided to conduct the attack, to conduct the war in the Middle East, because they wanted to drag the attention of the international community from what is being done in Iran as we speak, i.e. building the nuclear capabilities there, into another region. What better than a war in the Middle East with Israel? The third reason is the most important one. And for that, I would like to share a short anecdote with you. 2010, I was spending my sabbatical year at Stanford, and on my way back with my wife, which is here, and my kids, I was stopping in New York City, and I got a phone call at 10 p.m. from the secretary of the head of the National Security Council in the United States, General Jim Jones, back then. Jim knew us because before that, his previous position was the liaison to the Middle East for Clinton. And he visited the institute at Reichman University many times. When I came there and I met him at the White House, he surprised me with a question that I didn't expect. He said, would a yellow light be enough for Israel to make the decision to attack Iran? What does it mean by yellow light? It's like the light in the street. You have red, yellow, and green. Would a yellow light be enough for Israel to make the decision to attack Iran? I was surprised. I said, why are you asking me? Look, I try to be humble, which is not very common with Israelis, you know. What do I know about this subject? I'm not a nuclear expert. I'm a counterterrorism expert. Why do you ask me? Why don't you ask the Israeli ambassador in D.C. or I don't know who, the military attaché? He said, I'm asking them, but I want your opinion. I said, if you ask me, even a green light should not be enough to make such a decision. Now, he was crushed. What? United States is giving a green light to Israel to attack Iran, and you think Israel should not do it? I said, yes. And you know why? Because of 3 reasons. The first reason I've said, again, I don't refer to myself as an expert of Israeli Air Force, but I don't think that Israel is capable to destroy all the nuclear facilities which are scattered in Iran, dig very deep inside, and I'm getting a hint from Limor. I'll do it briefly. That's the first reason. I don't think that we can destroy all the capabilities. We can drag them back, we can harm that, but not to destroy. Second, and that's, I am an expert on, I know exactly what happened the day after, will happen the day after. Hezbollah will start, as the long arm of Iran, a war, unprecedented war on Israel with destruction that we never had in Israel, and this would be a huge price to pay. I would pay it if we could destroy their capability, but if we can't, I wouldn't pay it. And the third reason I've said, if Iran will become nuclear, this is an existential threat to Israel. I'm not underestimating that. But I don't think that the first thing that they would do is to attack Israel. They would actually use that in order to conquer Saudi Arabia, as we said, Mecca and Medina, and other countries. Why should Israel take those hot potatoes for everybody and pay the price? Then and I'm finishing with that, then he asked, so what do you recommend to do? 2010. I said, what is needed to be done? The United States should build a second NATO, a military alliance against Iran with Israel. This second NATO would have been created after the 7th of October. That's the main reason why Iran decided to attack Israel in order to end the process of, or the beginning of the process of normalization with Saudi Arabia, which is the anchor of the second NATO against Iran.
So I want to follow up on what you've said, and feel free. And I'm going to ask first our American experts. Looking from this side of the Atlantic, what went wrong? Because for many years it seemed like Israel has the upper hand vis-a-vis Iran. We were on the offense, they were on the defense, etc., etc. Something broke prior to October 7th. Something very essential broke. Iran feels much stronger, much safer, much more, I'll use a Jewish word, chutzpah, much more courageous to do things which it didn't be prior to October. What happened? And Victoria, I'll use something that you referred to. Maybe the withdrawal from the JCPOA was a mistake.
Oh, I would push back against that. I think the withdrawal from the JCPOA was a very courageous and correct decision on the part of President Trump to reverse what I see as a terrible error that really did nothing but slightly slow down Iran's progress towards a nuclear weapon. And I think the key thing that happened when we were in office was Prime Minister Netanyahu's 2018 visit when he revealed the nuclear archive that had been recovered from Tehran, which in my mind meant the JCPOA was fraudulently negotiated from the get-go because the Iranians insisted that they had no a potential military dimension, a PMD, for their nuclear program. It's very peaceful. John Kerry assured us it was going to be used to cure cancer. I have that quote. And that was false. They could have given that archive up during the negotiations and said, here, we did intend to have a weapon. We have designs for 2 different weapons. Here it is. We don't want it anymore. We are, peaceful. They didn't. They kept it secret. And that revelation, I think, gave us a great deal of clarity of where they were coming from. And so I would say the attempts of the Biden-Harris administration to get back into some Frankenstein version of the JCPOA has been the error here. That is what has emboldened them. And I have something of a fixation on global energy flows, and one of the things that happened in August is Iran surpassed Saudi Arabia as the number 2 vendor of oil to China. And so for Saudi, that's a loss of business, and that's the family business, and that's serious stuff. And as I've said to them repeatedly, I have no issue with you all selling China illicitly priced oil all day long. I think that's again, good for business. But that's what Iran is doing. And so they are completely emboldened and by policies that are encouraging them in that behavior.
So just a second, Elliott, because I want a quick follow-up on that. So as an advocate of the Trump administration in that era, why didn't U.S. use force to attack Iran after the Iranian attack on Aramco in September 2019, which was maybe the most outspoken attack by Iran until April 14 of this year? Because that would have slammed them or at least pushed them back.
Well, the response to Abu Bakr was very carefully calibrated by both Saudi Arabia and the United States. The Saudis obviously were quite shocked by the revelation of their lack of defenses and did not want another attack. The first thing was to get the fires out, get the refinery back online. That's the world's largest refining facility. It was supposed to cause a massive energy shock. It did not, which was interesting in and of itself. But the planning that then went on resulted in the elimination of Qasem Soleimani in January of the following year, and that was the response. There were not human casualties to Abu Bakr, and President Trump felt very strongly he did not want a bunch of civilian casualties in the response, and so that was the choice, and it really did reduce their terrorism.
I'm afraid there is another explanation as well, and it's more interesting if we differ. I think that the answer is American isolationism and Trump isolationism as well. And the Saudis were waiting for an extensive American strike against Iran. They were crushed with the fact that Iran directly attacked the Aramco facilities and took down 50% of their oil production as an outcome of that. Trump said, just give me a proof that Iran is behind that, and just wait and see what I'm going to do. And when the proof was given to him by the Saudis, he did nothing.
So, Elliott, I want to go back to my initial question. What happened? What went wrong?
Well, I think the turning point is the JCPOA. Why? If you go back to the Clinton years, the George W. Bush years, the Iranian nuclear program was not a secret. We all knew they were doing something. We had, in those years, about 10 UN Security Council resolutions, unanimous, with Russia and China, unanimous, saying Iran cannot enrich uranium. We signed agreements, for example, with the United Arab Emirates and Jordan on the use of nuclear power, in which we made them promise, the United States made them promise they would not enrich uranium. You need a reactor for energy, you will get the fuel from outside, and then you'll give it back. The JCPOA said, first, Iran can enrich uranium. We were saying to our allies and friends, never. Now Iran can enrich uranium, and, as Victoria said, it didn't stop them from doing anything. It postponed. That's all it did. So if you're in the IRGC, if you're the Ayatollah Khamenei and you're looking at this, the Americans have just given up. The Americans have just said, okay, enrich uranium, build missiles, subvert your neighbors. Your nuclear weapons program has to slow down a little bit. So that's an enormous victory for Iran. I think that's the point at which they said, okay, the American government is adapting itself to our domination of the Middle East. I think that's the moment.
So, Anat, we will touch what should be done. But an additional thing that Iran did, we looked at the nuclear threat as the existential threat for many years, obviously so, because of the obvious reasons, et cetera, et cetera. And we looked at the conventional threat, also known as the proxies or the octopus hands or whatever you want to use it, the ring of fire. We have many phrases in Israel. We looked at that and we said, we can handle with that. What seemed to happen since October 7, because it entered our homes, and that's the vicious in that attack, and because we're seeing what's happening in north of Israel, and Jordan was mentioned, and Judea and Samaria is mentioned, and Yemen, etc. Seems like Iran has very successfully built another tool that puts Israel at some kind of an existential threat, because we Israelis ask ourselves, can we live forever with attacks from all open fronts, or maybe we should look for a safer place? And that's what Iran is looking for. So what can we do, and what we should do, and how did it happen?
I think that we need to look at the proxies, and we need to look at our borders. In our borders, we need to have like area that nobody can cross. It's an area that everybody that crosses this area, this security zone around our borders, will die. Not like it was in the Gaza Strip, when actually we give up of this area, we had it, and people just walked with flip-flop and dishdasha and slaughter and rape and kill. And it was before, but in this time it was in a mess. The other thing that we do not understand the mindset of those people. I'm coming from criminology, sociology, psychology. Nobody, I think that the Americans didn't buy even a rug from a Farsi guy in the market.
No, they probably bought it, but they didn't get it.
No, they could get it, but all the negotiations that we see between the West and the Iranian is ridiculous. Also, I'm speaking about us. There are not so many people who know how to negotiate with Arabs. They don't know how to do it because it's a different way to negotiate.
But Anat, do we know to negotiate with Arabs?
I
Looking
said-
at the outcome, we Israelis.
I said that we
Okay.
are not. I said that we are not. When the war started, I'll just give you an example. When the war started, I said on TV, on camera, they will ask, first of all, the female security prisoners from Israel to let them be released. Why the Hamas would like to have the female security prisoners? We're speaking about gender issues in this society. They are nothing. But to be able to understand the mindset, they are nothing, but at the same time, their honor is around those people. It was the same thing with the Gilad Shalit negotiation, that we got a sign of life just after we gave them, we released few female security prisoners. Actually, it was in my recommend. We don't know and we don't understand that we have people here that they are not mentally ill. We like to say, oh, he slaughtered and beheaded in London someone. No, he's not mentally ill. They have this pathology in the level of the collective. And this pathology is to hear things like that. For me, the smell of blood is very natural. Could you believe that somebody will say something like that? This is what they said. And we don't want to hear what they're saying. We interpreted the Arabs and the Iranian in a way that twists the truth. And sometimes this political correctness that we have in the West and also in Israel, you cannot put things on the table and to say, this is the truth, this is the reality, don't detach yourself from that. The other thing that we see that I defined it, this syndrome, many years ago in my books as Shahada mania. Shahada is the obsessive way to carry out istishhad, self-sacrifice. You have it in the Shia, and you see it also in the Ashura ceremony that they hit themselves with the blood in the streets, and now we see that some Sunnah adapting this issue. And Elliott, you spoke about Mecca and Medina. They have common Karbala. The most important places for the Shia, Mecca and Medina, it's to be able to control the Sunnah world. And so this is the Ashura ceremony, and the obsession to carry out istishhad is, as a criminologist, I would say that it's very, very similar to a drug addict that wants his legs fixed. This duda, the worm that digging inside the mind, that they go to do something without seeing anything, and they cannot feel any sorrow when they have the victims. Because of that, they can slaughter children, rape women, and it's not just raping. They cut organs. They did horrible things. And another thing that I would like to suggest, to look at Iran as the Shia version of ISIS with a state. It's not less than that. They are well organized, they have a state, but the same pattern like ISIS. ISIS speaking about the caliphate, and they're speaking about the Iranian hegemony that was so many years ago with their history, and they feel like that the Sunni world, the Arabs, stole it from them. So this war wouldn't ended. And I think that what Boaz said, and also Victoria, is very true. We don't have to do the dirty job for the whole world. You know, when we will be weak after a war with Iran, the whole Sunni world will come to us. We need to remember that. It's not Iran, it's not the problem just of Israel. They are killing Americans on Iraq soil. Every day they attack Americans and they're killing soldiers there. And they do it on a daily basis. They do it in Yemen, they do it everywhere. And actually our hostage, you have so many American hostage, and I'm not speaking about selection between the Americans and other nations, but the American should not appease them. It's also related to the war with Russia and Ukraine, that the Iranian supplied the whole weapon there. A lot of drones and other weapons. And so I think that it's not just our business.
You want to refer to that, Boaz?
I do. As a non-party breaker, I disagree to the term. No, not with Anat. Anat, I agree. Anything that she says, I agree. I disagree with defining the war that we are facing now an existential war. We are frightening ourselves. That's not the case. Existential war for Israel is one of the two. Either a nuclear war that can destroy Israel, and that's existential threat, or the Yom Kippur style war in which Arab nations, Arab armies invade into Israel and exterminate Israel. We are not at that stage. Far from that. The 7th of October was not an existential war, and all the wars since the 7th of October until this very moment is not an existential war. Maybe in 15 minutes it will become an existential war, but even
you
then...
You know something of that?
No, but even...
You have a pager, right?
But, no, I don't have a pager. But even if the overall war will open in the north, and we wrote a whole research on what would be the nature of this overall war, it's still not an existential war to Israel. It's an unprecedented war. We'll suffer from, in my view, thousands of victims all over Israel for a long period of time. That's a different discussion. But that's not an existential war. Hamas and the Palestinians are posing a tactical problem to Israel, not more than that.
But let me give you just a phrase and elaborate. Looking at the watch, the famous watch in Palestine Square in Tehran, which started 2015 with the famous speech by Ayatollah Khamenei, saying Israel is not going to exist by 2040, and it's counting down to that. Right. What he's saying is not that we are going to kill you in a single war, we're going to exhaust you.
Welcome. The Zionist state, Israel, is under existential threat from the day that we have been born until this moment, and until the day we will have peace with all our neighbors. When it will happen, probably not in my lifetime. Okay? So it's not that we don't have an existential threat. Of course we do. All of them want to eliminate us. But the war, and that's the mistake, we refer to that war as existential war, and then people start to run away from Israel as an outcome of that. It's not an existential war. Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, before the 7th of October, definitely after the 7th of October, is not posing more than a tactical problem to Israel. Hezbollah is posing a strategical problem to Israel, and Iran is posing an existential threat to Israel. And for the last year, we are in a war of attrition against a tactical problem instead of dealing with the strategical and existential problems of Israel.
Welcome to Israel. Remind you what Henry Kissinger said 50 years ago? So go back there. We touched what's the problem. I want to touch the solution, because it's very easy saying that, okay, the US should do more. There will be a new administration within 4 months from now. Either Trump is going to go back or Kamala Harris. What should be done in order to, and I think, as someone who deals with this stuff for 40 years now, I agree with you, it's not only an Israeli problem, because when Israel is weak, or seems to be weak, the US is weak, and when the US is weak, Israel obviously is weaker, and looking at what's going on in Ukraine, vis-a-vis Russia, and China, which we never have dared to deal with Iran 5 years ago, as President Trump said on the opening night of the IC on Thursday evening, etc., etc. And furthermore, looking at the area and the broader world, what should be done? How can, from the Israeli side, and mainly from the American side, the next administration can be brought to be the World Cup, the world policeman once again, and the world needs a policeman, obviously, because the world is going crazy.
Well, I think, we know very clear. It's a fascinating election because we know what both of these people will do. Neither of them are currently the president of the United States, but the policies are very, very clear. And I think, for this particular issue, the most important thing, I guess, would be in the first year of a Trump administration would be to finalize the Saudi deal, which is when, not if, at this point. The parameters of it are pretty clear. It's an extraordinary moment. I mean, to have thought, in 2017, when President Trump made his first trip abroad to Riyadh, took the first presidential flight from Riyadh to Tel Aviv, where he actually laid out this idea for a Middle East NATO, as you put it, we called it MESA, the Middle East Strategic Alliance. At that point, it was aspirational to think that Israel might be in it, and the original views was the GCC plus Jordan and Egypt, and I told them all very frankly that our plan was to get Israel into it eventually, and they said, yeah, maybe 10 years hence. Now it's almost a given. And so get that deal done, get MESA into place. The Iranians hated it, which means it was a good idea, and really impose, I think, Trump's vision for NATO, which is that the region that is supporting this alliance, bears the bulk of the burden for it. Fortunately, there's a lot of money in the Gulf, so that's not going to be a huge heavy lift. But you need that American touch, American leadership, and then that's where the U.S. alliance with Israel is so powerful as a point of power projection.
But that's defensive. If looking at that alliance, it's defensive. What do we do in the offense to stop Iran? Because Iran, as we said, feels very safe to go very close. I mean, nobody in this room would fall if in 15 minutes, as you said, we will hear that Iran decided to bomb a nuclear, I don't know, like the North Koreans did 15 years ago or 10 years ago. Nobody, I mean, it's nearly a given. So what should be done to stop them, to deter them? This word that wasn't used here, deterrence.
Well, then that's just, I'm going to defer to Elliott on that analogy, but I think that is the critical point, because the current administration is taking a highly defensive posture in which they are not taking the strikes General Korea advocated, because they're their line is that they don't have authorization from Congress to do that, which is actually untrue, but that's their theory. But I agree.
What we should do, I think, is actually first, I would love to see both presidential candidates now say what President Biden said in 2021. It's also what his predecessors said. It's about 5 presidents in a row have said, we will not permit Iran to get a nuclear weapon. Now, start out by trying to negotiate that. But you need to be credible to the Iranians. They need to believe that at a certain point, yes, at a certain point the United States will be willing to use force when it's obvious that they're about to build a nuclear weapon. Now, President Biden has said that. They also changed the terminology at one point. Remember, said we won't let them field a nuclear weapon. Then that was pulled back. So it's not clear. What is clear is that the Iranians don't believe it. They don't believe it. They think they're going to be able to do this slowly. They're getting closer. How close? Don't know. It's not 2 weeks. You know, the 2 weeks or 1 month refers to having an adequate amount of enriched uranium. We still don't know how close
The
they
90%.
are. No, but yeah, they have that. The question is whether they have a nuclear device. And the answer, I think, is we don't think so, but we don't know. I say we don't know because the whole world was surprised when North Korea did it. Surprised when Pakistan did it.
But furthermore,
So,
Elliot,
yeah.
just a second, because in 2003, when the U.S. invaded Iraq, the Iranians were very much afraid, and they've stopped working with their armed group, etc. We have dozens of signs in the past 2 years that this armed group is reworking. It's working again. So given that if it's working, it's dealing with what shouldn't be done, and then we don't know what's going to happen.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, I have criticisms of all the previous administrations on this, including the Trump administration. I am on Abqaiq. I think the United States should have struck back after Abqaiq. And I think whoever is the next president has got to let them know, we are willing to hit you. Now, the killing of Soleimani was a very good idea, not only because he was a terrorist, not only because he had American blood on his hands, but because it was a message to Iran. Every time we have sent a credible message to Iran, they have backed off. They did it for the Iraq war. They did it toward the end of the Trump administration. These proxies were doing what they do in Syria and Iraq. And we sent messages to Iran. You know, if these proxies kill an American, we're going to hit Iran. Not the proxies, we don't care about them. You. In July, August, September of 2020, there were, as I recall it, 33 proxy attacks on Americans. Then we told the Iranians, you kill an American, we're going to hit Iran. In October, November, December, there were 4. 33 to 4. Why? They were scared. They're not now scared. And that is what I think is missing here. Credibility of an American promise. If you do this,
You will suffer.
You will suffer. For the attack on April 13th, they didn't suffer. For all of this.
So, Boaz, I want to take that into the Israeli arena. You were very rightly so, in my eyes, saying that we exhaust our resources fighting the weakest of our enemies, Hamas, and we have no resources left for fighting the stronger and the strongest ones, from Hezbollah to Iran. Maybe Israel should reverse, given the US is not very much interested, involved, etc. And instead of beepers being blown in Lebanon, they should be blown in Tehran. And maybe if the Houthis attack from Yemen, the Iranian infrastructure, oil infrastructure, gas infrastructure should have some failures in Iran, etc., etc., etc. Maybe we should go to that war because they're our enemy.
Before Boaz answers, we had 2 carrier task forces. it's not fair to say that the Americans have no interest in the Middle East. Americans are not going to do anything. It was very clear, I think, to the Iranians that if they attacked Israel again, or if there's a war between Hezbollah and Israel, the United States is going to defend Israel. At least going to defend Israel.
So I must,
and it scared the
Elliott,
Iranians
I must say two things about that. Sorry for that. One is that it's very bad for Israel. If Israel needs others to defend it, it breaks Israel's deterrence. That's A.
I
Just
agree.
a second.
Welcome to life.
And yeah, okay, but this in reality bites. Yeah. And secondly, there is a very nice Jewish story about a guy called Hershale, who used to come to a restaurant every night and say, "Give me some food," and the owner didn't give him, and he used to say, "Then I'll do what my father used to do." And after a week, the owner said to him, "Okay, I'll give you food if you tell me what he did, what he used to do." So he gave him food, and he said at the end, "My father used to go to sleep hungry." So I'm not so sure that this administration will strike if Israel is being attacked again. I don't want to test it. I want them to be deterred by us and not by promises a week before the election.
Yeah, I think there is a big question here. We're really talking about Iran, but as someone who's been in the U.S. government on and off for
forever,
decades, you know the expression. We used it. Israel used it. Israel must be able to defend itself by itself against all enemies.
Given American.
We are past that. We are past that. If Iran and its proxies attack Israel, Israel should be defended not only by itself, but by the United States.
Boaz.
Once again, I did these mistakes that Israelis hardly do, and this is be polite and give a person a comment, a short comment, and now he took all my time. No, I'm just kidding.
Israel and politeness. Israel is in politeness.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. Look, here I would like actually to unify everything that you have heard from the panel, and I think that we all say the same in a way. What's needed to be done? First of all, we need to acknowledge that the war with Iran is probably imminent. We have to have this war. This is a RAG regime, Islamic extremist regime that swore to exterminate Israel and doing whatever they can to prepare this extermination. That's we take for granted. And we cannot lay back and turn our eyes up to the air. But we need to prepare ourselves to that. We don't need to be dragged into that the way that they want. The Iranians are chess players. And anyone who plays chess in the audience knows that this is a strategic play. You plan 5, 6 moves ahead, and you calculate your move based on your speculation what your enemy would do. What we are facing is a chess game, and we are playing poker. We need to think strategically. And think strategically is think 3, 4, 5 steps ahead. How it's all connected. We need to build this international military alliance, this Middle Eastern military alliance, second NATO, or whatever, any way you call it, fine with me. We are talking about Saudi Arabia, Gulf countries, Sunni countries, Israel, Jordan, Egypt, that already show that they are capable and willing to do something on the 14th of April. They actually, it took me by surprise, defended Israel. Let's call a spade a spade. And that's the first thing that needs to be done to prepare to this war. The second thing that needs to be done is to end the war right now.
In Gaza.
In Gaza. To cut a deal with Hamas, end the war, and bring all the prisoners, all the hostages. Back to Israel. The deal with Hamas, let me finish. The deal with Hamas is not the problem. The deal with Hamas is the solution. Because the deal with Hamas will bring another deal in the north that, by the way, I don't buy for the long term, but for the short term I do buy that, the Hochstetter deal. And what we need is to buy time now. We need to buy 1.5 years, 2 years, until Hezbollah will definitely provoke his own commitments, no doubt in my mind. But in 2 years, we will renew the army, we will renew our forces, the ammunition, international support, United States support, building this regional alliance, and we will prepare to the real challenge, the imminent war with Iran. Not to be dragged into a war that we don't want, we don't need at this right particular period of time.
Anat.
If we can end this war in Gaza, it will be wonderful. But I think that if we'll have Hamas regime, the Islamists there, still in power.
Hamas regime in power, my goodness.
I know.
Sinwar in power.
You can say.
Yeah, that's really terrifying.
It's not terrifying.
We have Khamenei, we have nuclear, and we have
nuclear, but you wouldn't
in Gaza.
You wouldn't use
my goodness.
nuclear weapon on Gaza, right?
Yeah,
you
you're
don't
right.
do it also on Iran.
You're right.
So
we will have nuclear.
Okay, let me tell you something about Hamas. We have in Gaza actually a Palestinian state, Islamic Emirate, with a border with Israel. We have international border that recognized by the UN. We have a border. They have border with Egypt. It was actually the case study for a Palestinian state for us. And I think that we underestimated the Hamas. I agree with Boaz that Hamas is the little Satan, and Hezbollah and Iran is the biggest one, and Hezbollah is bigger than Hamas. But there is connection between, a network between all of them. And Islamic Jihad, I wouldn't give up saying by them. But to be able to finish this war, we need to finish it with achievements that not tomorrow they can rebuild this as a factor and do that. And I want to add one more thing that we didn't speak about Qatar, this kingdom of evil. Nobody mentioned it. Qatar has American big base, military base in Qatar. Why America didn't tell the Qataris, if you wouldn't push the Hamas to release the hostage, we'll act against you, or maybe just to take it out, or I know that it's very naive to say that, but they have the leverage to push the Qataris to deal with the leaders of Hamas.
So now you are underestimating Hamas and its
No.
leaders that are being puppeted by Qatar. Qatar doesn't rule to that extent.
No,
Hamas.
I can tell you that from my experience, the leaders that in Qatar are less influential than the leaders that in Gaza. And I'm not speaking just about Sinwar. Part of them, we actually conducted target killing. But even after we assassinated Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, the founder of the Hamas organization, it's changed a little bit. It's changed and it's useful. But it didn't solve the problem. Because in their eyes, Israel has no right to exist. And you know what? They're speaking also about the West. I can say one sentence that will make a sense. When I interviewed the founder of Hamas and the leader of Hamas, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, in 1996, he said that for him, the relationship between Islam and the West is like a bee and a flower. She sucks the nectar, but after that, we'll smash the flower. We'll take the technology, we take everything that the modernity can offer us, but we reject the lifestyle of the West. And you can see that, especially when we're speaking about terror attacks against youth in the Nova Festival, in Bataclan, in the Dolphinarium, in Arena Grande, Manchester. So we need to understand that this is the mindset of those people.
Yes, but you spoke. I'll say just one sentence, because it's very easy, and it's very easy to send everyone to fight and to be killed everywhere all the time. It's very easy. We will fight forever. At the end of the day, I can use a very nice term as exhaust our resources, and a much less nicer term as our kids are being killed in Gaza every day. And it's a much less nice. I think that you spoke on two different levels. If we speak about Iran, and Iran is the big Satan, as they refer to us, small and big, but they are the big Satan. And if we want to deal with Iran, we need to get rid of the little obstacles on the way. And exactly what Iran is trying to do is to stick us to those wars. And if we want to get it, and that's nearly a political dispute between the two of you, but if you want to get rid of Hamas in Gaza, bring another administration to Gaza. Bring someone else to do the job.
I agree that we can use the Beirut model and to send...
If not, we are stuck there forever.
I have suggested the Beirut model and to send...
This is the difference between the false concept of ultimate victory versus Hamas.
No, there is no ultimate victory.
And there is no ultimate victory. We won the war against Hamas. Hamas is crushed. It doesn't exist militarily wise. It doesn't exist. The administration doesn't exist. Will Hamas recover from that? The answer, unfortunately,
no, the answer,
is
there was
yes.
a question from here. Just a minute. There was a question, and it's in the definition. When Hamas invaded Israel in October 7, it had 5 brigades and 5 battalions and brigades, etc., etc. It invaded with 3,000 armed soldiers. That was the invasion, followed by 3,000 civilians who came to loot, kill, whatever. Currently, Hamas can fight guerrilla. It cannot fight as an army. Those are two totally different infrastructures.
We can use the Beirut model. And
which is what? 1982?
Yes,
we appoint Bashir Jumayel and then he's killed and we're in there?
And then we conquer Gaza and live in Gaza happily ever
I'm not
after.
speaking about that. I'm speaking about we enable Arafat with this guy to get out from Beirut, and we didn't kill him to stop the war. To be able to stop the war in Gaza.
And that's ended Fatah.
And then we brought it to Ramallah.
No, it didn't end Fatah, but it actually gave us something at that time.
Definitely.
So if we want to finish this war, and I agree, we need to find the system how to finish it without the threat of another
with bringing back the hostages.
And bringing back the hostages.
Which is the most important
We'll keep on fighting and we'll bring the hostages.
We can do that.
Yes,
So we have still a minute and a half. We have 4 minutes left. I remind you that the issue was Iran. 1 minute for each one about looking for a solution and giving optimism. I insist on being optimistic, looking at the future, because otherwise, what are we doing? So Boaz, we start with you.
First of all, if the war will be stopped now, we can save the few hostages that are still alive. We can create the second NATO. The second NATO can actually take some important role in the future of Gaza and also to contribute to rehabilitation of Gaza. And we will build a military alliance versus Iran. That's the future that I expect and I wish to see in the Middle East. Right now, we are as if we are in a dark alley fighting against a gang that attacks us, 5 people, 2 kids, 2 muscle men, and the big guy, the head of the gang. We are fighting against one of those kids, and we are in a war of attrition against 15 years old boy. And even if we will crush him and we'll have an ultimate victory against Hamas, it will not deter an inch of the interest of Iran to exterminate us. We need to deal with Iran, and we need to stop this war of attrition right now.
Elliott.
I just want to mention we have one other ally that we should never forget. Sorry. I just want to say we have one other ally we should not forget in this struggle against the Islamic Republic, and that is the people of Iran. They hate this regime. Every opportunity they get, they rise up against this regime and are imprisoned or killed. And it will keep happening every 3 years, every 5 years, until someday that regime falls. So we need, and the we here certainly includes the United States and Israel, to be doing everything we can, publicly and covertly, to help the people of Iran against this vicious regime.
Victoria.
Well, I couldn't agree more strongly with Elliott on that point. My friend Len Kordakovsky and I have written on what we call the Cyrus Accords. Sorry. Okay. My friend Len Kordakovsky and I have written on what we call the Cyrus Accords. I think getting the message to the Iranian people that there is a better future on offer is enormously important, and that future could include both the United States and Israel. And I just conclude by saying that Iran is trying to vote in the election in November. They are not only hatching assassination plots against the former president and, quite frankly, a number of his former administration officials. They are fomenting unrest in our streets, and they are meddling directly in the political process. That tells you pretty clearly who they don't want back in the White House, and we were no perfect. We were certainly not perfect, but I think the memory of 2017 to 21 lingers for them, and so I think that's pretty much the proof in the pudding.
Thank you. Definitely, Iran is the head of the snake and the big Satan, and appeasement is doing nothing. I agree that everything that will be, any conflict with Iran will endanger this barbaric regime, and I think that there is a great opportunity to the Iranian here to get free from this theocracy of evil.
So before we end, I want to add one thing from my end. I think that if there is one thing that we've studied in the past 10, 15 years, is that when we sit on the bench and watch, we lose. We have to be active. Us, Israelis, you Americans, together, if we're active, we win. If we're not, we lose. And now we have to be active. We can do that. And if we take some sushi, it will be very, very good to end. So thank you very much.